The first thing I noticed about Lucas was that he was already running before the rest of us had finished stretching. He moved along the riverside path with the easy rhythm of someone who never seemed to negotiate with his own body. Meanwhile, I was standing beside a folding table checking the marathon training plan on my phone for the third time, making sure I understood exactly what 8 miles at conversational pace was supposed to mean. Ethan? I looked up. Lucas had stopped in front of me, barely breathing hard. Looks like we're partners. The running club coordinator had matched people by projected marathon pace. According to the chart, Lucas and I belonged together. According to everything I had just watched him do, the chart was lying. You sure? I asked. He glanced at my watch. You're aiming for 4:15? I nodded. So am I. There was something about the way he said it that made me suspicious, but everyone was already moving toward the trail. We started with the group. Within the first mile, it stretched into smaller clusters, shoes tapping against pavement beneath the pale Saturday morning light. I liked numbers, distance, pace, heart rate, things that could be measured and controlled. Lucas apparently liked none of them. You check that watch every 30 seconds? He asked. Every minute. Much healthier. I laughed despite myself. By mile 4, I stopped laughing. My breathing had become too sharp, and our pace was slipping. I tried correcting it, which only made things worse. Lucas noticed immediately. Ease up. I'm fine. That wasn't a question. He slowed. I stared at him. You don't have to do that. We're supposed to run together. You can catch the group. He looked ahead. 2 runners were already disappearing around the curve. Then he looked back at me. I know. He stayed. For the remaining miles, Lucas adjusted his stride to mine so naturally that it almost irritated me. Whenever I sped up too aggressively, he pulled me back. Whenever I faded, he matched the slower pace without mentioning it. We finished beside the river several minutes behind the runners Lucas could easily have followed. I bent forward, hands on my knees. Lucas stood beside me, still frustratingly composed. Same time Tuesday? He asked. I straightened. The group meets Wednesday. I know. For a second, neither of us said anything. Then I realized he was asking whether I wanted to run with him when nobody had assigned us to. 6:30. He smiled. 6:30. As he walked away, I checked our final pace. Then I looked at Lucas disappearing up the path and wondered why a man who could clearly run faster had spent 8 miles choosing not to. Tuesday at 6:28, Lucas was already waiting beside the trail. You're early, I said. So are you. I'm 2 minutes early. Exactly. That became our rhythm. Over the next 2 weeks, we met for the runs on the training plan and, increasingly, stayed together after them. I approached every workout like there would be an exam afterward. Before we started, I knew the distance, target pace, and what my watch expected my heart rate to do. Lucas usually looked at the route and said, "Ready." The first time I stopped mid-conversation to check our split, he groaned. You know your watch isn't going to run the marathon for you. It gives useful information. So do your lungs. My lungs are dramatic. I've noticed. He was irritatingly good at making me laugh when I was trying to concentrate. He also remembered things. After I complained once about starting too fast, Lucas began holding us back during the first mile without mentioning it. When I told him I preferred walking for a few minutes after harder sessions instead of stopping immediately, he automatically kept moving beside me when we finished. None of it was remarkable by itself. Together, it started to feel like a pattern. One morning, after an easy recovery run, we stopped at the coffee kiosk near the river. I expected Lucas to say goodbye once we had cooled down. Instead, he ordered something and leaned against the railing beside me. You always this serious about goals? He asked. Only the ones I care about. So yes. I smiled into my coffee. He had barely touched his when I noticed several runners from our club passing along the trail. They were moving considerably faster than we had. One of them lifted a hand toward Lucas. He returned the gesture. I watched them disappear. You could run with them, you know? Lucas looked at me. I could. They're closer to your natural pace. You've been analyzing my natural pace? You're obviously faster than me. That bothers you? No. It makes this arrangement inefficient. His mouth twitched. Arrangement. Training partnership. Right? He took another drink. I waited for him to explain why I was wrong. Instead, he asked, "What are we running Thursday?" "You know exactly what we're running Thursday. Humor me. 5 miles easy. Then I guess I'll see you Thursday." I frowned. "Lucas." "What?" "You don't need to keep slowing down because the club paired us once." For a moment, the teasing disappeared from his expression. I know. It was almost exactly what he had said during our first run. Only now there was no coordinator, no group assignment, and no reason he couldn't choose someone else. Then he nodded toward my cup. "You finished." "Almost." "Good. You owe me an explanation for why anyone voluntarily signs up to run 26.2 miles and then spends the entire training cycle worrying about running it wrong." "I don't worry." He laughed. We stayed at the railing another 20 minutes. By Thursday, I had started expecting to see him before I even reached the trail. He was there, early again, and when Lucas smiled as I approached, I had the uncomfortable realization that I was no longer looking forward only to the runs. I was looking forward to him. By Sunday, the long run had become the part of the week I thought about most. I told myself that was because it was the most important workout on the plan. Lucas had nothing to do with it. "Too fast," he said 3 miles in. I checked my watch. "We're fine. You said that last time. And I survived." Very inspiring. I ignored him and held the pace. For another few miles, it felt good. My legs were light, my breathing controlled, and I started imagining race day with dangerous confidence. Then the distance caught up with me. The change came gradually. My stride shortened. My breathing stopped matching our rhythm. By the time I admitted I was struggling, Lucas had already noticed. "Back off. We're almost there." "We are not almost there. I can hold it." "No, you're trying to punish the last few miles for existing." Normally, I would have laughed. Couldn't. Lucas looked at me once and immediately slowed. "Don't," I said. "Ethan, you still have a workout to finish. So do you. This pace isn't doing anything for you." He didn't answer. That was when I glanced at his wrist. His watch screen was still visible from when he'd checked it moments earlier. The target displayed there was faster than the pace we'd been running even before I started fading. Not slightly faster. Significantly faster. I looked at him. "That was your target?" Lucas lowered his wrist. "Forget the watch. You planned to run this faster." "I planned a lot of things this morning." "Then go." He kept running beside me. "Lucas, shorten your stride." "I mean it." "So do I." He moved half a step closer, matching the pace I could actually sustain. I hated how relieved I felt. For the remaining miles, he stopped joking and paid more attention to me than to anything on his own wrist. When I tried speeding up, he pulled me back. When my breathing became ragged, he reminded me to settle it. He never touched me or dragged me forward. He simply stayed close enough that every time I wanted to stop, I could hear his footsteps beside mine. Eventually, the end of the route appeared ahead. I had never been so happy to see an ordinary stretch of pavement. We crossed our imaginary finish together. I slowed immediately, breathing hard. Lucas stayed beside me as we walked. "You should have left me," I said when I could finally speak normally. "Why?" "Because you ruined your run." He glanced at me. "I finished it." "You know what I mean." "Yes." "Then why didn't you?" Lucas looked ahead instead of answering. For several seconds, all I heard was the fading rhythm of our shoes against the path. Then he said, "You would have stayed for me." I almost argued. The problem was, he was right. 2 weeks earlier, I would have called what we had an efficient training arrangement. Now I knew the sound of his breathing well enough to notice when it changed. Knew when he was about to make a joke from the shape of his smile. I knew exactly how his stride shortened when he deliberately matched mine. And apparently I had begun depending on that stride being there. We kept walking along the river. My legs hurt. My pride hurt more. But underneath both was something harder to admit. The marathon still mattered. I just wasn't sure anymore that it was the thing I was most afraid of losing. After Sunday, I became too aware of Lucas. Not just whether he was beside me, but how close. The sound of his shoes. The shift in his breathing before he spoke. The way he looked at me whenever I checked my watch after he'd already told me not to. It made our next hard workout considerably less convenient. We met beside the river in the evening, when the path was quieter and the daylight was beginning to thin. My legs had recovered from the long run, but I still remembered exactly how it had felt to spend those final miles depending on his footsteps. "Don't start too fast," Lucas said. "I learned my lesson. You say that like I'm supposed to believe you." This time I let him set the pace. The workout was difficult enough that conversation disappeared for long stretches. We ran hard, recovered, then ran hard again. By the final effort, my lungs burned and Lucas's usual easy composure had finally cracked into visible exhaustion. Oddly, I liked seeing it, not because I wanted him to struggle, because for once, he didn't seem like the man patiently adjusting himself to accommodate me. We were simply two tired men trying to finish the same thing. When the workout ended, neither of us stopped immediately. We walked along the quieter stretch beside the river, letting our breathing settle. "You did it again," Lucas said. "What?" "Checked your watch before you checked how you felt. I like knowing where I stand. You like controlling where you stand." I looked at him. "There's a difference?" "Probably. Very scientific." He smiled, but I didn't. Maybe exhaustion made honesty easier. "I signed up for this because I needed to finish something hard on my own." Lucas's expression changed. "On your own. I know how that sounds. Considering we've spent weeks training together, a little confusing. I mean, I wanted to know I could do it without needing someone else to carry me through it." He was quiet for a few steps. "Is that what you think happened Sunday?" "No." Sounded like it. I stared ahead. The river reflected the last light between the trees. "I would have stopped if you hadn't stayed. That doesn't mean I carried you. It means I needed you." The words came out more sharply than I intended. Lucas stopped walking. I took another step before turning back. He was watching me with an expression I couldn't immediately read. "And that's bad?" he asked. "I don't know. You ran every mile yourself." "That isn't the point." "Then what is?" I had no answer that didn't expose more than I wanted exposed. Lucas came closer, not touching me, just reducing the space between us. "You keep acting like accepting help somehow makes the finish less yours." I looked down at my watch. His gaze followed mine. "There," he said softly. "What?" "You're doing it again." I let my arm fall. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then I tried to make it lighter. "You must regret getting stuck with me." Lucas didn't laugh. "You really think I'm stuck? You could have had easier training." "Maybe. Faster training." "Definitely." I waited. He looked toward the river, then back at me. "Running with you is the part one look forward to most." Everything in me went still. He hadn't said anything romantic. Not technically. But there was no training metric I could use to explain the way he was looking at me. I swallowed. "That's a terrible reason to sabotage your pace." His smile returned, smaller this time. "Good thing you're not in charge of my reasons." We started walking again. Our shoulders came close once, then separated. Neither of us commented on it. When we reached the point where we normally went our separate ways, Lucas lingered. So did I. The workout had been over for several minutes. There was nothing left to cool down from, nothing about the training plan we needed to discuss. Still, neither of us left. Eventually, Lucas stepped backward. "Peak run Sunday." "I know. Try not to race the first half." "No promises." He smiled and turned away. I watched him go. For weeks, I had been asking myself why Lucas kept choosing to run slower beside me. Now I had part of an answer, and somehow that was worse, because I was beginning to understand that the dangerous part wasn't needing Lucas to finish a run. It was wanting him beside me when there was no run left to finish. Sunday's peak run was the longest distance on the plan before the taper, which meant I spent Saturday pretending not to think about it. I also spent Saturday pretending not to think about what Lucas had said. Running with you is the part one look forward to most. By the time we met beside the river the next morning, I had successfully converted both problems into numbers. Distance, pace, fuel, water, things I understood. Lucas looked at my watch before he looked at me. Planning to behave today? Perfectly. That worries me more. For the first half, I did exactly what he told me. I held back. I ignored runners passing us. I checked my watch less often. Lucas noticed. Growth, he said. Don't ruin it. The miles accumulated. Conversation became shorter, then disappeared. The familiar riverside route stretched into the longer park loop we had been building toward for weeks, and eventually the confidence I'd felt early began draining out of me. This time, I hadn't started recklessly. The distance was simply hard. My legs grew heavy. My breathing lost its rhythm. Every remaining mile seemed to expand as soon as I calculated it. Lucas glanced over. No, I almost laughed. I didn't say anything. You were about to. I can't hold this. So we slow down. I looked at him. Not again. Ethan. This is your peak run too. And you can't keep throwing away your training every time I struggle. Lucas reduced his pace. I didn't. For several seconds I forced myself forward, angry enough to believe anger could substitute for energy. Then my body made the decision for me. I slowed. Lucas was immediately beside me. Go, I said. No, you've done enough. So have you. Keep moving. We continued. There was nothing dramatic about the next stretch. No sudden second wind. No miraculous disappearance of fatigue. Just one difficult mile followed by another. Whenever I drifted toward stopping, Lucas's footsteps remained beside mine. At some point, I stopped telling him to leave. When the end of the route finally came into view, neither of us accelerated. We finished together. I bent forward, hands on my thighs, trying to recover enough oxygen to be angry properly. Lucas walked a few steps, then came back. You okay? I straightened slowly. You did it again. His expression tightened. Can we not do this right now? No. We just finished. Exactly. I pointed toward his watch. You could have run that faster. Yes. You could have left me. Yes. The answer stopped me. Lucas held my gaze. I asked, then why didn't you? He looked exhausted now. Not composed, not teasing. Just tired enough that whatever answer he normally used to avoid this seemed unavailable. Because I didn't want to. That isn't an answer. It is. You just don't like it. Lucas, this is your training too. I know. Then why does my pace keep matching more than yours? He looked away for a second. When he looked back, something had changed. It doesn't. I stared at him. Then what does? You. The word landed between us. I forgot about my watch. Lucas stepped closer. Being beside you matters more to me than the pace, Ethan. For weeks, I had wanted an explanation. Now that I had one, I couldn't make myself breathe normally. Maybe it was the distance. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the strange intensity of finishing something difficult with the same person who had refused, over and over, to leave me behind. I didn't know. What I knew was that Lucas was standing close enough that I could see the uncertainty in his expression for the first time. Not confidence. Not patience. Uncertainty. He was waiting for me. I moved first. The kiss was brief. Deliberate. There was no accidental collision. No excuse available in the space between what I intended and what happened. I kissed Lucas, and after one stunned second, he kissed me back. When we separated, neither of us stepped very far away. My heart was beating harder than it had during the final mile. Lucas gave a breathless laugh. That wasn't on the training plan. I looked at him. No, for once, I didn't check my watch. We stood there in the quiet aftermath of the run, both exhausted, both smiling slightly, and neither of us pretending the thing between us was only about marathon training anymore. But as the intensity of the moment began to settle, another thought took its place. We had spent weeks pushing our bodies toward one enormous goal. Every long run magnified everything, Fatigue, trust, relief, dependence. Today had pushed all of it further than ever before. The kiss was real. I knew that because I had chosen it. What I didn't know was what it would mean on an ordinary morning when we weren't exhausted, when there were no impossible miles behind us, when the marathon was finished and Lucas no longer had any reason to keep matching his stride to mine. For the first time, I wasn't wondering whether there was something between us. I was wondering whether it could survive the finish line. The next time I saw Lucas, neither of us mentioned the kiss for almost 3 miles. That was impressive considering I thought about it approximately every 10 seconds. The taper had begun, which meant shorter runs, easier effort, and far too much available energy for thinking. Normally, I would have loved the reduced mileage. Instead, every quiet stretch beside Lucas felt like a conversation we were deliberately not having. He was still Lucas. He still arrived early. He still teased me when I checked my watch. He still adjusted naturally when my pace changed. But now I noticed every time our arms came close. Every time he looked at me for half a second too long. Every moment that would have seemed harmless before Sunday. Eventually Lucas said, "Are we going to keep doing this?" I kept my eyes on the path. "Running." He gave me a look. That was almost convincing. I exhaled. "What do you want me to say?" Anything honest would be exciting. I slowed slightly. Lucas matched me automatically. That almost made me laugh. Instead, I said, "I don't know what Sunday means." His expression tightened. "I know what happened. Good start. I mean, I don't know what it means outside of everything that's happening right now. The marathon, the training, the long runs, spending hours together every week, being exhausted enough to say things we normally wouldn't say." Lucas was quiet. I hated that I could hear my own fear underneath every word. Finally he said, "You think we kissed because we were tired?" "I think I don't want to decide something important while we're inside this weird little world we've built around one race." Lucas looked ahead. For several steps, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "Fine." The word hurt more than it should have. But he continued, "We don't have to decide what comes after the marathon today." I looked at him. "But I'm not going to pretend the kiss meant nothing." "I didn't say it meant nothing. You're trying very hard not to say it meant something." That landed cleanly. I had no defense. We finished the run without solving anything. But we didn't reset either. At the end, Lucas stayed while I walked my usual cooldown. I stayed beside him afterward. The kiss remained between us, changing the shape of every ordinary thing without repeating itself. Over the next several taper runs, that became our uncomfortable new normal. We weren't just running partners anymore. We also weren't anything I knew how to name. Then, after one easy club session, I overheard 2 runners talking nearby while everyone was cooling down. One of them glanced toward Lucas. "I thought you were moving up with the faster group." Lucas went still. The other runner shrugged. "Yeah. Weren't you invited weeks ago?" I looked at Lucas. He didn't answer them immediately. Something cold and precise clicked into place in my head. Weeks ago. Before the peak run. Before the kiss. Maybe even before I'd started asking why he kept sacrificing his pace for mine. Lucas met my eyes. The runners moved on, their conversation already shifting to something else, but I barely noticed. "You were invited to train with them?" I asked. Lucas looked toward the trail. "Yes." The single word opened every question I had been trying not to ask. "You never told me." "No, when?" He hesitated. I felt my chest tighten. Not because I suddenly understood what it meant. Because I didn't. All I knew was that Lucas had apparently been given exactly the alternative I'd kept telling him to take. A faster group. Training closer to his own ability. A reason to stop compromising his preparation for mine. And somehow he was still here. I looked at him. "Why didn't you go?" Lucas held my gaze for a long moment. Then he said, "Ethan, that's not a conversation I want to have standing in the middle of everyone." It wasn't an answer. But for the first time, I knew there was an answer waiting. And with marathon weekend getting closer, I was running out of places to hide from it. Our final easy run before marathon weekend should have been simple. Short distance, comfortable pace, Nothing left to prove. Instead, I spent the first mile waiting for Lucas to explain why he had turned down the faster group. He finally said, "You're going to keep staring at me until I tell you, aren't you?" I wasn't staring. You nearly ran into me twice. That sounds like a pacing problem. A small smile appeared, then disappeared. We continued along the riverside trail at an easy rhythm. "When did they ask you?" I said. Lucas looked ahead. "A few weeks ago." "How many?" "Enough." "Before the peak run?" "Yes." That answer mattered. Before the brutal miles. Before he told me being beside me mattered more than pace. Before I kissed him. "You could have switched." "Yes." "And you didn't." "No, why?" Lucas slowed to a walk. I stopped beside him. For once, he didn't make me drag the answer out of him. "Because I wanted to run with you." I waited for the qualification. There wasn't one. "They were faster," he continued. "It probably would have been better training for my pace." I knew that. Then why? Because by then I was already choosing which runs I looked forward to based on whether you were going to be there. The trail suddenly felt too quiet. I thought about his watch during that difficult Sunday run. The faster target he'd abandoned without complaint. The mornings he had arrived early. Every time I'd told him he wasn't obligated to stay beside me. He had known that all along. "You should have told me." What would I have said? That the guy who checks his watch every 60 seconds had somehow become more important to me than my splits. Despite everything, I almost smiled. Lucas didn't. I stayed because I wanted to, Ethan. Before that long run. Before the kiss. There it was. The answer I had wanted for weeks. And instead of making me feel better, it frightened me. "You changed your training because of me." "I chose my training." "You gave up the faster group." "Yes." "What else are you going to give up?" His expression hardened. "That's not fair. Race day is in 2 days." "I know. And you're faster than me. We've established that. So run your race." Lucas stared at me. "I was planning to run with you." "No, Ethan. No. You've spent weeks adjusting for me. I'm not letting you spend the marathon doing it too. You don't get to decide what I value. And you don't get to turn your race into another sacrifice I have to feel guilty about." The moment I said it, I knew I'd hit something deeper than pace. Lucas stepped back. "Is that what you think this is?" "I don't know what this is." "Yes, you do." I looked away. Marathon weekend had always seemed like the destination. Now it felt like an expiration date. Lucas's voice softened. "You keep talking about the race because it's easier than talking about what happens after it." I couldn't deny that. After the marathon, there would be no training plan telling us when to meet. No long run requiring us to spend hours together. No practical reason for Lucas to slow down. And no excuse for me to keep postponing an answer. I looked at him. "Run your own race." He was silent for several seconds. Then he nodded. "Okay." The word hurt exactly as much as it had the last time he'd said it. We finished the easy run together because it was already the run we'd started. But when we reached the end of the trail, neither of us asked when we'd meet next. At the race expo later, surrounded by runners collecting everything they needed for marathon morning, Lucas and I moved through the same space with an unfamiliar distance between us. Before we separated, he looked at me. "Good luck, Ethan." "You too." That was all. For months, the marathon had given us a reason to keep showing up beside each other. In 2 days, Lucas would run ahead. I would let him. And somewhere beyond 26.2 miles, there would be no training plan left to bring him back. Marathon morning was the first time in months I started a run without Lucas beside me. The crowd around me was enormous, but his absence was the thing I noticed. For weeks, I had known exactly where he would be. Half a stride ahead when I needed pulling back, beside me when I was struggling, close enough that I could hear his breathing when conversation became impossible. Now there were hundreds of footsteps around mine, and none of them were his. When the race started, I ran my own pace. Not Lucas's. Not the pace I imagined I should be capable of. Mine. For the first several miles, I checked my watch constantly. Eventually the numbers settled into something predictable, and I stopped fighting them. The distance accumulated. There were good miles and ugly ones. There were stretches when my legs felt impossibly strong and others when every step seemed to require a separate decision. As the race grew harder, I thought about all the training runs Lucas had stayed for. Then I did something I hadn't been sure I could do. I kept going without him. No voice told me to shorten my stride. No footsteps adjusted to mine. No one prevented me from making stupid decisions except me. Somewhere far ahead, Lucas was running the race I had insisted he run. The thought hurt. It also made me proud of him. By the final miles, everything had narrowed to movement. One more block. One more turn. One more mile. When the finish finally appeared, I didn't accelerate dramatically. There was nothing left for that. I simply kept running. Then I crossed it. For several seconds, I could only walk and breathe. 26.2 miles. I had done it. My first instinct was to look at my watch. My second was to look for Lucas. That realization almost made me laugh. The race was finished. There was no next workout to coordinate, no pace to compare, no reason for him to be waiting for me. He had finished ahead of me. He could already be gone. I moved through the finish area toward the meeting space, surrounded by exhausted runners and the noise of people, finding whoever had come for them. Then I saw him. Lucas was standing there. For one ridiculous second, I wondered whether I was imagining him. Then he smiled. Not the teasing smile he used when I checked my watch. Something smaller. Nervous. I stopped in front of him. You waited. Yes. How long? Don't make this about pace. I laughed, exhausted enough that it came out almost broken. Lucas stepped closer. You ran your race? I nodded. You? Yes. There was pride in his face when he looked at me. Not relief that he'd managed to get me through something. Pride that I'd done it myself. The thing I'd wanted from the beginning. And he hadn't needed to stay beside me for it to belong to me. For a moment we just stood there. Then I said, there's no training plan anymore. I know. No long run next Sunday. I know. You don't have to wait for me. His eyes held mine. I know that too. The words struck me harder than they had on our first run. Lucas took a breath. I don't want another excuse to keep seeing you. My chest tightened. I don't want to call it training. I don't want to pretend that kiss happened because we were exhausted. And I don't want to spend the next month hoping some race gives me permission to ask you this. Ask me what? His nervous smile returned. To be with me when neither of us has anywhere to run. There was nothing ambiguous left in it. No shared workout. No adrenaline that could explain the moment away. Lucas had already crossed his finish line. He had stayed anyway. And now he was risking an answer he couldn't control. For months, I had treated independence like a finish line of its own. If I could complete something difficult without needing anyone, maybe that proved something important about me. Today I had. And standing in front of Lucas, I finally understood that doing something on my own and choosing someone afterward were not opposites. I fell for you somewhere in the training, I said. Lucas's expression softened. I know. That confident? You're terrible at hiding things when you're tired. I laughed. Then I reached for his hand. This time I didn't need exhaustion to explain why. I want this, I said. You and me, not as running partners. Lucas closed his fingers around mine. Good. And we should probably have an actual date. Definitely. One where neither of us is sweating. That feels ambitious. I smiled. The marathon was over. The reason we'd been assigned to each other was gone. The schedule that had kept bringing us back to the same trail had reached its final line. Lucas was still there. And for the first time, instead of asking why he kept choosing me, I chose him back. Several weeks later, I met Lucas beside the river on a Saturday morning. There was no marathon training plan waiting on my phone. No required distance. No target pace. For the first time since we'd started running together, there was nothing we were supposed to accomplish. Lucas looked at my wrist. You're checking your watch. Habit. We haven't even started. I like being prepared. For what? I opened my mouth and realized I didn't have an answer. Lucas smiled. We started running. The trail looked almost exactly as it had the morning we'd been paired together. Same river beside us. Same familiar turns. Same steady rhythm of shoes against pavement. But there was no group ahead for Lucas to catch. No coordinator who had assigned him to me. And no finish line waiting somewhere in the future to explain why we kept showing up. We ran easily. At one point, I noticed Lucas matching my pace and smiled. "What?" he asked. "Nothing." That was definitely something. I glanced at him. "The first time we ran here, I kept wondering why you wouldn't leave me behind. And now I know you're stubborn. Romantic. I'm working on it." He laughed. A little farther along, I instinctively raised my wrist again. Lucas groaned. "Seriously?" I looked at the numbers for half a second. Then I lowered my arm. "So," Lucas said, "what are we training for next?" A few months earlier, I would have needed an answer. Another race. Another target. Another finish line I could turn into proof that I was moving forward. Now I looked at the path stretching ahead of us. Nothing. Lucas turned toward me. "Nothing? Not today." I changed my pace slightly. He adjusted with me. The gesture was so familiar I almost missed what had changed. At the beginning, Lucas had slowed because we'd been assigned as running partners. Later, he'd stayed because he wanted to. Now neither of us had to match the other at all. We simply did. His shoulder brushed mine for a moment as we ran. I smiled. There was no medal waiting at the end of this route. No training box to check. No extraordinary event holding us together. The marathon was already behind us. Lucas wasn't. Neither was I. And as we followed the familiar trail beside the river, I finally stopped thinking about where the finish line was. For once, continuing together was enough.